We already discussed a lot of implementation details and some concepts, and today we are talking about one more concept, and we'll go and see implementation details of it. We are talking about state. For people who are not familiar with Guix Home project, I recommend to watch previous streams before and look at RDE repository on Source Hub or GitHub. For people who didn't watch a stateless auth stream, I also recommend to check it out, because what we discussing today is related to the stream. We talk about one important idea about separation of configuration and state of application. And as you already know, Guix Home tries to make your configuration, to make all the configuration for all your user applications to be declarative and reproducible. That means that you write a big file in Scheme which declares everything that you want to have in your home directory, and after issuing one or two commands you get all the configurations installed, and the one missing piece of it is state, because almost every software requires some data to operate on, some files to store the temporal data, or maybe something else. And without state, it can actually do a lot of useful work. That is why we need to care about state. But at the same time, we try to minimize the state and make it as explicit as possible, because we don't want to lose the state accidentally, or don't want to spread it all over our home directory. We want it to be very precise in some specific places, and we want to know about the state of the state. Okay, it was about prerequisites to our today's stream, and a little warning for people who want to try Guix Home. You can do it, but it's still in development, and some breaking changes can appear and can reduce your user experience. And also for people who want to try state, it's not in the master branch yet, but it will appear soon. But it's still a highly experimental feature, and I'm not sure about its future, but hope I will figure out it with the help of the community, of course, if it's a necessary tool, and if I need to keep it. Okay, let's go to some theory about state. I decided to enumerate few states of the state, and let's call it state lifecycle. First of all, you need to somehow initialize the directory or file with the state for your application. For example, for pass utility, also known as password store, you need to create a Git repository which will contain all the passwords and other stuff which is necessary for this utility to work. And in some other cases, for other software, it's also necessary to initialize the state somehow, especially if you used this software on the other machine and you have already some data. For example, some applications create those state directories automatically and doesn't really care about your previous data. But for example, if you want to persist this data between different hosts, or to move this data from your old working machine to the new one, it's a cool idea to keep it somewhere backed up on some server or somewhere else, and to fetch it before you start using this software. And the second stage in this life cycle is modifying state. In most cases, it's done during the operation of the software by issuing some commands or just using the software. And we don't cover this stage of state lifecycle because it's very dependent on the software. And another stage of a lifecycle is synchronization. It can be pulling some data, for example, for your Git repository or your mailbox, maybe pushing or backing up. And it's also dependent on the type of the state, but it's more usual action, and for some types of state it can be similar, and we will call all of it a synchronization. The details of implementation of such action will be different for different types of state, and even for the Git repositories or directories which are synchronized with rsync, those actions can be different, but we will call all of them a synchronization. And the last stage of lifecycle is archive or delete, which means that we don't need the state anymore, but we want to save it somewhere, or we don't care at all about the state. We also won't cover this stage of the state, but I want to say that on every moment after you did a synchronization action, we would like to have all our explicit state to be in such situation that if we remove it, we don't lose any data because it's already pushed on remote Git repository or synchronized on some backup server or somewhere else, and we can make init action and get all this data back again. And also, every time we move on new working machine, we want to be able to initialize our state with init action and get all the necessary files. I think that's enough about state lifecycle, and let's talk about some use cases, maybe practical or not very practical. For example, for some software, it's necessary to make some actions before we starting using the software. For example, creating some directories or files, maybe with some data, or maybe just empty directories, but created. Many software can do it automatically, but some software requires to do it manually. Also, the another use case that I already mentioned is copying files from backup server to new machine on new installation. For example, you have a wonderful collection of wallpapers, and you store it, and from time to time you back it up to remote server, and you switch to a new laptop and want to have this collection be on your new machine, and you just initialize the state, for example rsync state with this collection of wallpapers on your machine, and you are ready to use it, which is cool, I think. Another example, which probably more realistic, is fetching mail boxes. On first fetch, it will just get all the mails on your new installation, and after that you can call a sync action from time to time to get updates for those mailboxes that are under your state management utility, under the control of your state management utility. And also another case that I face relatively often when I switch to new working station. It's cloning of working projects to the directory in the same place where they have been in on my previous host. And yeah, it's just cloning, no synchronization, everything else I do myself, but I really enjoy when it's already here just after installation of my configuration. And yeah, not maybe a big deal to do it manually, but still pretty cool to have such feature. And to show the example usage of this utility, I will be demonstrating some small examples. Let's start from the configuration. Okay, this utility uses Shepherd and creates Shepherd services and operates on those Shepherd services using actions. It's not any external utility, it's just a wrapper around Shepherd services. And that means that we have our Shepherd in user space up and running. You can see a root service and GPG agent services currently on my laptop. And after I will uncomment home state service type and we'll do reconfiguration, we should see another service appear here in the list, which will be a state service, and nothing special happens. But if we take a look at our service definition here, we will see another comments that I made for not to type everything oh forgot the word. Okay, I just prepared it for the demonstration. Okay, we have two states here, one having rsync type and another have a git type, and you can see the path to the destination for the state and a remote for rsync state. It will be host somewhere in the network, in my network, and pass to the directory on this host. And for git repository, it will be a link to git repository itself, and it should be enough. And now I hope I saved everything. Now I can do another configure for my guix home, and I will get two more services, which will be state, for example, rsync state and toolkeys. And as you can see, they are stopped right now. And here I used the following notation. The services, the state services which are stopped means they're not initialized yet, and if they're started, they already initialized. And I will show the implementation details later, but for now I think it's enough information. And now I need to initialize those states. I can do it separately for each of them, or I can make it for all of them at one action. And let's take a look at tmp directory here, and let's SSH to my to the host in my network. And And let's see at tmp state directory. Okay, it's exactly the same directory that I used in the definition of the rsync state, which means that during init step it will copy all the data from this directory to my local host to tmp directory. And let's try to do this init action. For that I will call init action on state service. Actually we can doc list actions. We can see all the available actions on the state service. It's sync and init for now. Maybe later they will be a little different, but for now it's enough. Let's do init action. For all the init action on state service will call init actions on each not yet initialized states. It probably will take some time, and yep, it finished. As you can see here, the first state was initialized with rsync utility, and the second one using git clone. Yep, and now if we take a look to our tmp directory, it will have two directories, and let's go to example rsync state directory. We see the same files as we see on the right, and let's create one more file. For example, echo another hello to hello txt. During previous experimentation I already created hello file from xy, which is my host. This is why I need to create one more hello file. Okay, we see that we modified this directory, and we want to be sure that all our modifications will be on the remote server. And for that I will call heard sync and state. I can specify exactly this state here if I want, but I will prefer to call sync action on all the states that have this sync action. And as you can see, it's just uploaded only hello txt file on the remote server. And let's take a look. And as we can see, it's here on the remote server. Let's take inside it. It's another hello here. Let's something new. Let's add few more lines to it. Hello txt here has 2 lines. Hello txt here have 1 line, which is expected. And let's do one more synchronization, and you can see that it synchronized hello txt one more time, and now it's updated and has all 2 lines that we have on our local machine. And that's how it works. Let's take about some implementation details, but before talking about them, I want to thank you Xinlu, Chen, also known as Yoctocell, and all the people who participate in the development of the project, who write emails, make some suggestions and comments, who use it. Really appreciate and enjoy your involvement in the project. Thank you so much. And let's go to implementation details of state service. Let's open the definition. Oops, too big. Definition contains just list of states and every state is just another Shepherd service. But let's go to state scm. Oops, not here. State scm file, and let's see how it implemented. We have our definition, very simple definition. It extends only Shepherd service, and its default value is empty list. And the function that we use to extend Shepherd, it just takes a list of Shepherd services and adding to this list another service, which is state service itself. But this state service itself knows about all the services because they're provided as a list here, and here inside the actions it operates on those services by calling some actions, and mostly that's all that the service do. It calls actions and it starts services which are already initialized, and that's it. The only thing that I forgot to do is start service for the state after init. Okay, now I will add the missing feature. The state service itself after starts, and during start it will check if for each service, for each state service, it will check if state exists for this service, and if it's true, it will start this service too. And you will see that heart status will show that all initialized services will have the plus sign on the left. Nothing very interesting here, and two actions that custom actions for state service is sync and init actions, which I hope very intuitively obvious. Init action is just calling init on each non-initialized state, and sync action calls related sync actions on each service, which has a general sync flag equal to true. That's made to prevent the situation when we call sync action on services that doesn't support sync action. And let's take a look at how those sync actions, those state services implemented. There's a function called state generic, which returns a one Shepherd service. This Shepherd service has after start equal to false. That means it doesn't start automatically. It will be started only by our state service. And thank you very much for your comment. And here in start action you can see that it checks if state exists already and prints a warning and returns false, which means that this server won't be started and won't show plus sign on the left. And it obviously implements Shepherd actions. State exist is a generic action which applies to all the states. I don't see other cases where this function won't work, but if it won't work for some cases, it probably will become customizable action, but for now it's just a file exists call on the path, on the target path. there is unchecked init action, which takes the value of init gexp argument for the function and just call this init gexp, but this action will be called by init action, which just wraps it with a check of existing of the state, and if the state already exists, it will warn about it, otherwise it will call unchecked init action. Sync action just takes sync gexp and call it without even wrapping it into another check, because I think that everyone who implements sync gexpression will be aware of the format for this gexpression and don't really need to make those checks, to have those checks provided by developers of this function. And another important action is metadata action, which just returns a list of key value pairs, very generic pass and self, and some additional metadata provided by the implementers of different state types. And here you can see the arguments. First one is pass, which is a target pass for our state, and some key arguments, keyword arguments, which is init gexpression and sync gexpression. For generic state generic, it just creates a directory, and sync gexp do nothing. And also additional metadata, which has general sync flag equal to false by default. And yep, that's pretty much it about generic state. And let's talk about more specific cases and how this generic state used in those more specific implementation of state. For example, let's take rsync state, which actually just a wrapper around a state generic function, which, as we remember, just returns a shepherd service. And here we have two arguments, which pass and remote. Pass is our target pass, and remote is something some source pass, I would say. It can be a local pass or really remote pass somewhere in the network. And here you can see that we call a state generic function with argument pass as a first argument, which is obvious, and with init gexpression equal to this function. It's a gexpression which returns a function which just call rsync with three arguments, flags A and P. A stands for archive, which just a combination of different flags for keeping symlinks, permissions, and all other stuff, and P for showing the progress of synchronization. It takes the another argument is remote, the source directory that we want to copy to our local path. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is just additional stuff, like taking some data from arguments and metadata, and just redirecting the output of rsync utility to our terminal, because we have heard utility which works with shepherd daemon, and this rsync utility runs on the shepherd daemon, we need to redirect the output of our rsync utility to our heard utility, and that's what we do here. Actually, we just take the output of rsync and send it to our heard utility. The sync G expression, it's another lambda function which just call rsync but with slightly modified order of the directories. It copies everything from our local directory to the remote directory. We can implement much more complex logic using the same approach. It can be another state rsync function, but with some additions, like which do backups, which can remove local data, or which will remove remote data if our local data is removed, or something like that. And because it's everything here is just a guile, and you can use the power of full-fledged general purpose language. You can implement any logic here, but I would advise to keep it as simple as possible, not to shoot in your foot in some unpredictable cases, and to make other people also able to use your implementations. And obviously, if you want, you can contribute your patches to RD project, and later when we will merge the guix home to guix project itself, you will need to contribute it to guix. I hope we will merge it someday in few weeks, or maybe 1-2 months. I don't know exact dates because I'm not sure about how this merge process will go, and if at all this tool will be accepted by upstream. Anyway, the implementation looks pretty simple, utilize a lot of guile here, and almost the same you can find for state git. It just clones, and it doesn't provide a G expression for sync action, and also you can see it provides general sync equal to false inside the additional metadata, and the rsync state provides general sync equal to true. That means that when I call heard sync state for every state rsync, it will call sync G expression, and for every git state it won't call sync G expression. Yep, and we talked about almost everything that is related to state management in guix home. Another feature that not yet implemented. Sometimes I want to initialize my local project with not only with data from remote Git repository, but with some configuration. For example, I want to have few remotes, like maybe one to Source Hut, one to Savannah, and maybe to someone's VPS or something like that. Some other options to be present on init step, and here you will be able to provide a config using keyword argument to state git, and it will add this config to your Git repository, and you will be able to start work on already configured Git repository without setting some additional parameters, because they will be set already on init step. which is also cool, but not yet implemented, as you can see. Okay, there's another question where we have to implement our state for different with different types. For example, do we need to implement state git inside state model, or we need to implement it inside version control model? It's a good question and not very easy actually, but I think that we will go with the second approach. We will be implementing those states inside the namespace where the utility exists, because for example for state git I want to have a keyword argument for configuration for the git repository, and tooling related to git related to generation of git configuration is based in version control namespace. And also I think that there will be some cases. For example, let's take the example of async utility. We declare a service for async, and we say that we want it to place all the data inside mbox directory, and that means that async service will extend our state service with its own state async automatically without even declaring this stuff manually. And it will be logical to put this state async function inside async or mail model. Yep. And that's pretty much it about implementation details. Few words about Guix Home in general, about our progress. We already implemented few different services which already mentioned in previous streams. You can see them here. Probably you don't know yet about SSH. It's already implemented and it works. Also some services are in progress for GPG, JIT, mcron, which is service for scheduling tasks. For example, you can schedule some regular updates for your states, like fetching your mails using this mcron daemon, which will be run by Shepherd, which is which makes the chain of extensions pretty long already. And generic service, which allows to declare simple configurations for some programs that don't have a specific service for them. For example, you have a program and you already have a .dot file for it. Using generic service, you can just specify a local file inside your repository with configuration, and it will be installed in the place in .config directory where it belongs, and it will work, and it will be managed by Guix Home, which makes the migration process very simple. If you don't have, if there is no service for the program yet, or you just want to use your already existing .dot files, you can declare generic service for them, and it will just copy the content of your .dot file to the target place. And if you already ready to use Guix Home services, you can one by one substitute those generic services with more specific services which are composable and work with each other in some way. And obviously the state service, we already discussed it. Actually, we spent already 40 minutes discussing it. And some services on the way is bash, emacs, which will be relatively beefy service. I think pass, which should be simple, and it also probably it will be utilizing capabilities of state management that we discussed today, I think, or also known as mbsync, because utility called mbsync, but the project called isync. And Sway is a window manager that I use. Actually, not window manager, but Wayland compositor, but still on the way. And I hope will be finished in some near future. By near future, I mean few weeks or maybe months or years. Who knows? Okay, another news about progress. We already started a discussion on guix devil mailing list about upstreaming guix home. There was a few responses and people seems excited about the project, but before upstreaming it, we need to make sure that it works and works for many people, and to fix some issues if they appear, and just to we just need to make sure that this project is mature enough to be a part of guix GNU system distribution. And for that, our next steps will be cleaning up already implemented services and parts of guix home, and some UX improvements. You probably saw that when I call reconfigure action, it looks pretty long. I hope it will be just guix home reconfigure in some future, but for now those actions, all actions are separated and manual. Maybe some of them can be automated and combined. Also, we need to make a documentation. For now, you can use guix home only if you read development mailing list for RDE project, and it's not very user friendly, but the project is still in development phase, and yeah, documentation is not ready yet, but I hope we will start to work on it soon. And after we finish our clean up, and we'll make at least those services and at least bash service available for usage, we will make an announcement for early adopters, and we'll invite people to test guix home on their own risk, and to provide a feedback on it, some ideas, suggestions, bug reports, and so on. And after that, when we will get some experience not only from our personal usage, but also from other people, I think we will start making patches to upstream, gradually moving our project to the guix repository, and hope in the some future it will be just a part of guix and will be maintained inside guix repository, and will be available for every GNU guix user, even on foreign distros who just using guix as a package manager. It also will be available for them. I think that's all for today. I'm really glad that you joined and participated, and hope you enjoyed it. See you soon. Bye bye.